the CEO comes and says she needs a presentation for tomorrow, right? You're not going to say no. You're going to have
that never happens. What are you talking about?
Right?
Hello and welcome to episode 106 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott, and this weekly podcast serves as my excuse to chat with marketing friends, old and new, that I've met through my career from techie to CMO, and hopefully share with you some marketing street knowledge that my guests and I have picked up along the way. Talking to friends, a quick hello to friend of the show, Keith Smith from The Advertist. Thanks, mate, for your kind review. This episode is recorded on Friday the 18th of March. Hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. This week, Jeff Clark and I continue with the 5 effing marketing fundamentals. I indulge my inner content geek with a chat with my chum Cathy McKnight from the Content Advisory, and we wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with her colleague Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing thought. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back.
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Right, on to my regular guest. You know Jeff Clark, Principal Strategic Advisory here at Rockstar CMO and former Serious Decisions Forrester Research Director. And we continue with our 4th in our 5 effing marketing fundamentals. Last week, we chatted about communicating the story. And this week, we dive into getting with the beat of our customers' buyers' journey. Welcome back, Jeff, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, my friend?
I am doing fabulous.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. We've had a quite nice sunny day today. I feel that spring is springing. Obviously, you've changed your clock, so you've already fallen forward or sprung back.
Yeah, got a bump on my head too.
Whereas in the weird world of time, which is odd because we invented it,
excuse me.
we don't change our clocks yet.
Well, you know, we're in our Congress, we're debating such monumental issues like making daylight savings time permanent, which I personally am not a fan of. And it's like, could you please get on something else?
Yeah,
it's a little bit more consequential.
Yes. Well, we're going to change company. So we're an hour closer. Do you feel an hour closer, Jeff, this week?
Absolutely.
All right, so that's the time sorted out and the weather. Let's move on to the topic of the day, which is our 4th in our series of the 5 effing marketing fundamentals, or the fundamentals of marketing, whichever way we describe to brand this. Whatever the title of the book is going to be, we don't know.
I don't know. I know we got to find a publisher too.
These days, mate, you can just self-publish.
I know. Yeah.
So in the first one, we covered branding. Then we covered research, and last week we covered the story. And this week, my understanding from the notes that we've prepared is that we're covering buyer and customer life cycle.
Absolutely.
What say you, Jeff?
Absolutely. Well, we can't enter one of these things without our analogies to the rock world. Every song needs a beat, needs an arrangement. You need to get in sync with the rhythm of the customer. So, the challenge is engaging the buyer and, in their story. Any good song is you relating, what you're thinking and what you want to write about and you want to get out there. You're relating it to your audience So, when you're thinking about the customer life cycle, what's the hook? What's the beat? What's the arc of the journey? What's the arc of the piece? Is this a short hit? Is this a long instrumental? Do we have a solo? Whatever, and it's not that. I think one of the things is that, which as we go through this, it's like, well, not every song you put out, not every journey you're going to try to orchestrate or align with the customer. They're not all the same. Right. And so it's like, not every song is going to be the same, and you're going to, you need to have some variety for your fans, but you want to know, but basically you want to know what they listen to. You want to know how to set up your set lists, etc. Yeah. And then play it out and see how it works. So, and also you just got to remember, we're not doing this. I mean, when you hear some recording artists talk about their work, it's like, they're like, they don't want to, they don't want to pander the audience, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. We're selling things. So
we're the artist that's sold out completely.
Oh, we're
if you want us to play it, we'll play it.
Yeah, that's right. If you're going to buy it, we'll play it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the overarching analogy is we're going to be in harmony with our customers, and hopefully,
absolutely.
Now we've covered this, that's the last time I can say that analogy, right? Because we've...
Yes. Yes.
All right. And also, based on the fact that we do sometimes prepare for these things, I know, or a little note tells me, that you've got 5 steps to the buying and customer life cycle.
Shall we start? Google Docs.
Shall we start?
Here's a little plug for Google Docs that are actually giving us...
So what's your step 1 of your 5-step program?
Well, as I was thinking through this is to an extent, this is one of those things that's when we're talking about marketing education and the whole reason for putting these fundamentals together. This is kind of one that is fairly, I would say, is new. It's not that people didn't have an idea about steps in a buying process or whatever, but it's like things have definitely evolved, and so. I think one of the things is when you go through these 5 steps, there's a lot that is new and changing. And one of the things is the first step is develop that understanding of a buyer's journey, like just in general. There's a lot of models out there. I had a boss that always talked about the AIDA model: awareness, interest, discovery, action. When I was at Forrester Serious Decisions, we had our own model. There's the education phase, solution phase, the selection phase, and then there's little steps in there. And then you've got to put on the rest of the customer life cycle. So what happens immediately upon selling. How do you get people to make sure they're increasing their use of your products? How are you going to get them back into the mode for reselling, supporting, et cetera? So I think that the first step is to, and this particularly again for the marketing leadership team or the CMO, is to say what's the model we're going to work with, because they all have validity. But you may say, for our customer base, again, my experience is in business to business, in business to consumer, it's going to be a little bit different. So pick the model that you think works in general, and just lay that down as a basis, because you're going to be adding a lot of detail to that as we go through the other steps.
Do you think? And I've done this a number of times, and I've even invented these things as a consultant or as an analyst in the past. I've always tried to keep these things the minimum kind of thing that you can do, because I think we went through a phase where these things were getting super fucking complicated. But I think that do you think that's about right? I mean, those models that you've just talked about have got 3 or 4 steps, and then add on to that the sort of the post sales step.
Well, I think
you're about 5 steps. Is that where you think you need to be?
Yeah, and the one reason to keep it simple at that early foundation is because you're going to build complexity upon that. So you don't want to start with something complex and then make it even more complex. And that's that's a way to approach any problem.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think you can paint yourself in a corner, can't you? You can create this complex customer journey. Then you realize you've got to overlay it with, the different industries you sell into, the different personas, the different everything else. And all of a sudden, you've got this nightmare of spaghetti, haven't you? That becomes your customer journey. So that's your step one: define the customer journey and keeping it as simple as you can possibly get away with. What's step two?
Well, you kind of hinted to step two, because step two is identify the personas, because you should really look at, I mean, each persona is going to have its own journey. And again, even then you're abstracting out, because you're not talking about necessarily individuals. You're talking about in general, the champion for a solution. How are they going to go through this journey? The decision makers, influencers, ratifiers, who are they? Is extremely important. And one thing that was interesting, I was looking at some of the stuff from the team at Forrester I used to work with, and I was involved in some of the buyer guide reports, buyer insights guides, and they said that last year they found that 63% of the purchases had more than 4 people involved, and that's up from 47%. So we go from roughly half of purchases having 4 more people to 2/3, and plus there was an increase in the number of general interactions. So therefore, it's like, you want to make sure you're honing in on where do each of these people get involved in the buying process, because the buying process is for the company, not the individual. So where do they get involved? And I won't get ahead of myself, because then you get to the next part.
I think persona definition is a bit like what we were saying about customer journeys. I think we went through a phase where they were getting super, super complex as well and you need to find those attributes of your personas that you can actually do something about. The other thing about personas as well is a lot of people base their personas based on job role or job title. I'm not so keen on that. I think you can do it based on need, right? And then you have clusters of need, don't you? And also identify where they sit in the buyer's journey, rather than because for example, I was working with somebody once, and we were talking about the fact that there was early adopter types in their personas, and a CMO that was risk averse or an IT guy that were risk averse both needed the same information from that vendor in order to get over that risk averseness. So they actually have more in common with each other through being risk averse than actually their title in their role. That's the sort of approach?
Absolutely. And I also remember the days when, we used to give names to persona, like persona's Anna, and this one's Helga. And it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, to me, and again, this comes from by experience, both working with serious decisions and then, being in there, is just like, they was kind of like, let's lay out champions, decision makers, influencers, users, etc. And then you could aggregate to abstract what titles fit into those. But, I may have, a lot of the people who be listening to this, they're working with companies that have multiple products. And for a product, the champion might be in IT because of maybe the technical infrastructure nature of it. But they have another product that the champion is actually somebody who's in a business role, operations role, or whatever. And then there be some, major initiatives for which your solution, the champion goes right up to a C-level person. That's where the simpler you keep both the steps you're tracking in the buyer's journey and the personas, you're not going to get yourself wrapped around the axle as you go further down the trip.
Yeah, and on that naming thing, what I always try to do is actually validate the persona with a real person in the CRM. So if you are going to give them a name, it should be the name of somebody who's actually in your CRM who reflects that person. And also, like anything in marketing, this can't be done on a whiteboard in a hotel, conference room with just you guys in it. This needs to be fed by that kind of intel as well, doesn't it? But we've talked about market research already.
Because that kind of brings it to life. So
that's step 2. So step 1 is just define the buyer's journey in general. Step 2, identify the personas. What's your step 3?
Is actually determine typical buyer journeys for your target personas. And actually, I'd say for your target personas and for particular, general offerings you provide. Because again, if you've got multiple different types of offerings, the journey is going to be different. And to me, this is where technology has really helped change the game in the last I don't know. I mean, probably every year it's changing it, but certainly in the last 5 or so years, because obviously you could go to analyst research, again, like at Forrester, they have the B2B buyers insights, which basically are doing a lot of interviewing to understand what types of interactions people like, where do they get involved in a journey, and they did it by role and by industry type, et cetera. So there's material like out there that gives you a general idea. There's the old-fashioned method, which I used once, which I think I've referred to a couple times. That I used at Pega, which is where we would go into the data warehouse and we would pick a deal, or we pick a series of good deals where we won, and we would just dump out all the interactions because the data warehouse was collecting sales interactions, developer, website, email, almost anything that we could capture, we did a good job.
Yeah, but there's value in that. I mean, you described it as the old-fashioned method, but I mean that's still data related, and there's value in that because, and it was similar to a conversation I think I was having with your former colleague Kerry Cunningham on the show a couple of weeks ago or last week. Is the issue of that we tend to think when we're talking about leads and MQLs and all that kind of stuff, we're thinking about individuals going through the pipeline, whereas actual fact we should be thinking about revenue opportunities or accounts, right? So I think where you're doing that collection of data that's account based, then you've got a much better view, haven't you, of where an organization is in the customer journey.
Yes, and actually, the biggest challenge here, whether you do it the old-fashioned method or the new methods, is that you've got every person involved in the buying process. They're in your CRM attached to the opportunity, because that's that's where analytics tools, et cetera, fail. Is it's like we're not tracking everybody involved in the decision. We're just tracking the decision maker or the one person that was the original lead. But
although those individual journeys are important too, because we need to have that tracked. It's just that not everybody's following along at the same time, right? Within an organization, an IT guy may get involved later in the deal. If we're talking about B2B and we're talking about tech, it might be that, your champion got involved early on. They may step away and come back later. All that stuff, isn't it?
And the legal guy, keep the legal guy out of the journey as much as possible.
But then again, that content needs to be available because it might be that a bright champion thinks, my biggest problem with this might be legal, so I better get them, get them that content immediately.
And you want to help them,
absolutely.
So I think that as much as and sometimes it's good to do the old fashioned method just to sort of like for your own edification, if nothing else. But with marketing attribution tools, there's certainly some that came out with a journey mapping capability, so you could see everybody attached to an opportunity and where the engagement was. There's also customer journey analytics and orchestration tools. That's now a category that's tracked by Forrester and Gartner. And that's where there's a lot of tools that were very successful in business to consumer marketing and selling that are now, having the capabilities to do B2B or B2B to C. Again, the biggest challenge is you got to make sure you're collecting all the data for all of the interactions, because that was one of the things that was a big eye opener for me of doing the buyer insights guides, is that there are a lot of industries for which offline interactions are more important than the online interactions. And certainly there are going to be some people involved in the buying process, like a decision maker, C-level person, for which you're not going to get a lot of online interaction that you can measure. So any of these tools, is really best to find ways to aggregate from everything. And of course, this relies on salespeople updating activity in the CRM. But that's the other thing was interesting, is it used to be that the average number of interactions for a B2B purchasing process was 17, and that jumped up during the pandemic. That jumped up to 27.
And that's not changing. I mean, our remote behavior, our remote work behavior is never going to go back to that. And we moved, haven't we? We've moved to what used to be called virtual selling and used to be a thing, of a different discipline. That's just the way it works now, right? It's so much of this deal happens virtually before a sales guy gets involved at all, right?
Yeah, and particularly if you got, you got online assistants that are catching
Yeah.
people as they're on your
Yeah.
website, and so
Yeah.
that's a little bit of online off. I mean,
Yeah.
it's personal interaction that's complementing online. Got to be able to make sure you capture that as well.
So that's the first 3 steps. So what's the step 4?
Step 4 is really develop your plan for how you're going to engage the audience, and so the audience being everybody involved in a deal, so the multiple personas, where they are involved in a buying process, and develop your tactical engagement plans, your content that is going to help to engage them, collaborate with sales ops, sales training to make sure you're developing the tools that salespeople need, because again, whether they're doing this virtually or person to person, they need to have they need to be armed well, and make sure you're cover. And this is one of the challenges, because you want to make sure you're covering the bases so that the audience, which is never going to go along the journey, you can't create it for them.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure that they can self-select particular pieces of content that appear to be appropriate for them where they are in the journey. So you're kind of like, it's just almost like this is why more like jazz than it is like rock, because it's actually you're setting a structure, you're setting a rhythm. You probably start with some sort of melody, and then it's like, okay, wherever this goes is wherever it goes.
Choose your own adventure is the
and I mean, the one thing that's probably a downfall of the AIDA model with awareness, interest, but blah blah blah, is that you may. I mean, you mentioned some of the people that are probably more involved later in the stage, and those people need to become aware of you. Yeah. I mean, they're not all of a sudden it's like ABC company, and like, well, who the heck are they? And I've never heard of them, but there again, I don't I don't track.
But that's the critical thing with the journey, and I think that's when we as marketers make complete asses of ourselves, is when we assume somebody is where we think they should be in the journey, and we address them in that way, either through the email marketing campaign or something like that, and they're actually not. And then there's also this understanding that there's a group of people, some of whom have never bloody heard of us, and others are already in the functions and features and really thinking about how this tool is going to help them. And we need to make sure that the experience that we offer, the content we offer, helps all of them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's the 4th step. So how do we engage the audience in the arc of the story? So that's kind of like our content strategy, our sales enablement, our sequencing, and all that kind of stuff. So we're on to step 5. What's the final step?
The final step. A good final step in probably most any plan is test and refine, because you're not, it's not necessarily work out the gate, or also things evolve, right? So depending on market dynamics or whatever, things will change over time. So you can't rest on your laurels, even if you get it right the first time. So this is where the more tactical forms of measurement are really helpful. Email click-throughs, downloads, video engagement. I mean, I know when I was advising clients in the serious decisions, we'd often say, don't put too much store in these types of tactical measurements, but this is where they actually come in really, really handy, because you're trying to gauge the effectiveness of both the delivery mechanism, the tactic, and the content, and measuring the effectiveness of content is just, I mean, it's complex, because you've got, you've got the delivery mechanism, you got the content itself, you got the way it was pitched, you got the way it was, it's fulfilled, and all those things could be elements of why something works or does not work. And so
I mean, it's like everything, isn't it? I mean, you might run a PPC campaign or something like that, and the campaign may be fabulous, but the content is awful, or there's some point at which the handoff doesn't work, or the execution lets it down.
Or the worst part would be the content's great, but for some reason nobody seems to be interested, because I don't know, whatever the way you gated it, or the way it was pitched to them.
Yeah, I could talk about that for at least another 20 minutes, certainly about the measurement of content effectiveness, and the fact that, it might not be your most popular content. It's your most engaging content. But anyway, we need to move on because I just realized the time. And next week, our fifth effing marketing fundamental is marketing operations. So I think we'll dive into
get to dive into the weeds.
The measurement then, yeah. So finally, Jeff, on this particular point, why is this important? What was it? Why is it we need to focus on this?
It's funny because as we're putting this together, it's like it almost seems to be a theme that runs through all these things. What's wrong? If you get this wrong, it's like, well, you don't engage your audience. That's a problem with bad branding. It's a problem with not doing your research. It's the problem with not getting your story, nicely tied up. And if you don't, as we've gone through the various steps here, it's like if you don't understand where it's best to engage the client or prospect in their part of the journey, it's just going to, a great message could fall on deaf ears. And so it just leads to poor performance. And, and you just, as you point out, it's like, you just don't want to look stupid in doing this. You want to be able to be successful.
Yeah. Plus, if you're not helping them, somebody else is, right? And that's really what this is about, is helping them try and solve their problem. And somebody else is going to be doing that. So we get to the final a point in our agenda, which is that you need to select a song that works for this. What are you going for?
I am going to go for, this is a theme for the podcast. I'll Be There For You,
Nice.
which was a hit back in 1995, and it was the very familiar theme from the Friends TV show. But it does have. I always like to just dive through the lyrics and say what makes it relevant. And they said, so no one told you life was going to be this way. I'll be there for you. That's what you want to do as a marketer. You want to catch that customer and say, I understand what you're going through. So it's got the hook, it's got the rhythm that works with those fast video cuts, and it works with the art. So the arc of the whole Friends story.
Yeah, I love it. And so I'll be playing out with I'll Be There For You by the Rembrandts from 1995. Thank you very much, Jeff. And you'll be joining me next week, where we'll be talking about marketing operations. One of your favorite topics. I'm very worried we're not going to make 20 minutes on that particular one.
Maybe it has to be a two-parter.
Let's see how it goes. Anyway, so I'll see you next week, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No one told you life was going to be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke. Your love life's the away. It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you. When the rain starts to fall, I'll be there for you.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice excuse for a bit of a reminder of Friends there. And of course, that was I'll Be There For You by the Rembrandts from 1995. And maybe I might sound a little bit cheesy here, but being there for our customers as they try and solve their problems and buy from us is what our marketing should be all about. What do you think? Give us a shout on the socials. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn. Right, on to another one of my favourite industry chums, as I welcome back Cathy McKnight. Regular listeners might remember Cathy from episode 46. She is the VP of Strategy and Consulting and Chief Solver of Problems with the Content Advisory. She has 20 years of global experience and expertise in content strategy, content management, intranets, customer experience, and the tech that help make those things happen. Cathy has helped dozens of companies realize their content and marketing communication objectives, leading strategic business transformation initiatives and the detailed execution of enterprise technology implementations. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Cathy as much as I did. Welcome back, Cathy, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm very well, Ian. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're very welcome. I think last time you were on the show was episode 49, which is quite a long time ago, even for our regular listeners. So for those that don't remember you, tell us a bit about yourself.
All right. I won't take it personally that you haven't had me back in so long, but...
no, but also at the end of that show, because I listened to it the other day, I did say, I must have you back on the show. And where has the year gone?
You know what? It's COVID time. Hopefully we can stop talking, like it won't be a thing coming, moving forward, but time moves at a different pace over the last couple of years. So no offense taken, but so I am still chief problem solver with TCA, the Content Advisory. And I got a really long and sordid and not so exciting history in all things content. So technology, consulting, operations, strategy. And I love what I do. At TCA, I get to do all my favorite bits with great clients, starting again around the world, because I'm coming to your hood soon.
Yeah, I know. I'm really excited about that. I wonder if I should record a live show in London.
Oh, with Robert and I. That would be so fun.
That would be too fun. I think that would be very cool. And yeah, and don't talk to me about COVID time at the moment. If my voice breaks any time during this interview, you know why. I killed over with the vid. So there we go. And I've known you for ages and ever. And we have Robert on the show every week. And he tends to talk to us about content marketing and about those kinds of topics, which is what, I guess, if people have heard of content advisory through the show, that's what they'll know you guys for. Right. So what other services do you provide, Cathy?
So we like to say that we help customers tell their stories better. So sometimes that means building content strategies or operational roadmaps. Sometimes it's the elements that support that, things like audience personas, journey maps, social strategies, content-related technology selections. You and I are very familiar with doing those together.
Yeah.
But we also get to stretch our analyst chops with vendors and agencies with things like thought leadership, roadmap strategies, and now, speaking events are coming back, which we are happily seeing and attending in person more and more.
Yeah. And I'd encourage our listeners to check you guys out, because I've certainly had you support events, Cathy. I think there's a video floating around out there of me interviewing you on stage. So you're excellent at that. And then also last time, and we always talk about the industry news. Before I hit record, we were chatting about the gossip around the industry at the moment. So I'm going to ask you a question about that. Sure. Because last time you're on the show, we discussed some industry news, which is kind of rare for me, because we normally just chat about any old thing that's going on. But what do you think of the Binder Gather content acquisition that happened a couple of weeks ago? I thought that was really in your wheelhouse.
Oh, totally. For me, this is a love match. There is not a damn solution that I can think of that doesn't or wouldn't work better with an integrated structure for content ops. And that's what Content Gather brings to Binder. So it takes the structure and the logic and the process that you need and blends it with Binder's digital asset management prowess, which I think Binder's a great DAM. So I think that's great. Now, of course, like anytime vendors come together, merger, acquisition, whatever, the success of the vision lies in the investment and the commitment to integrate the parts, right? And we've all seen extremes on that spectrum. So,
well, we've also, some of us in this room have been part of those as well. So,
not mentioning any three-letter acronym companies, right?
I heard Gather Content was described as a CMS. I've used a content management system. We're going to obviously geek out on this stuff, and we're going to dip into this terminology and assume that people know who Binder are and Gather Content are and all that kind of stuff, because that's what we do. But I've heard it described as CMS. I've used it. I really liked it. But I thought it was more of yes, it does manage content. So technically, yes, it's a CMS. But but I saw it more as in the content operations area, where you're going to put your content, you're going to operationalize the editorial and then spit it out into something else. Do you agree with that?
100%. And that's one of the reasons I really like the pairing, because it's not just taking content management and pairing it with a digital asset management system, right? Yeah. There's actually the context and the process that's supported by that. And, companies of all size need efficient, repeatable content creation, approval, and distribution. That's one of the things that we go in and help our clients with is, a lot of them are really great at creating content, but, the process in which it takes to get it created and then published and then merchandised is really, really hard. Binder has been really challenged with being able to manage the text components of content. So when we think about content, and again, sorry, geeking out here, and not the finished asset, but the actual components that go into the asset. A lot of DAMs struggle with that, and Gather Content is going to help ease that burden, I really think.
Right, yeah. And I think as well, in how long, 20 odd years I've been in the CMS industry. Well, I'm technically not in the CMS industry anymore. I'm just a watcher from close by. There's always been this challenge of getting people to use the CMS. We've always we've always talked about the democratization of creation of content, assumed that everybody in the business was going to interact with the CMS. And to me, it seems it's remained the same three people in marketing today as it was 20 years ago, right? And so that promise has not been realized. Do you think these kinds of content operations tools are the future of how we might actually start to gather content, pun not intended, from our audience, do you think?
Well done.
I was trying to get off of just mention the vendor, otherwise people are going to think that's what we're flogging here. But if it's more about the content operations nature of it, and they're so well named, aren't they? Gather content, it's exactly what they do.
Yeah, it's actually a brilliant name, because I mean there are some out there that aren't, and we won't talk about that. Don't want to impact our analyst business. So I think to reiterate the question, I find it shocking that 20 years in, and same as you, that the technology is still not being used the way it is intended to use, and really would provide the most benefit, right? So you're getting the return on the investment if you actually use it the way the vendors have built it and intended it to be used. So content operations, it takes that content strategy, which is problem number one, because a lot of companies don't actually have a real content strategy, but it's putting into practice that content strategy. It's putting in the, you always hear about people, process, and technology, to actually absolutely execute against the strategy. And so, really when we start thinking about content ops, and a lot of companies don't know what to think about content ops, it's everything that impacts the delivery of the content strategy. And I think there are way more companies out there than not who need support in that, and really have to start trying to figure that out.
Yeah. And I think, the weird thing for me is I've even met marketing teams where not everybody on the marketing team would access the CMS. They're like, oh, no, that's Dave over there, or Joe, or Joanne, or whatever. Try and get all of them in. And I think, and when I've asked for access to CMS, they're like, what? No, you're the CMO, and we'll do that for you. And it's like, no, that's not how content operations works. We all are part of this chain, aren't we, of command? And if I'm going to approve content, I certainly don't want to do it by email and Word, right? I want to do it in the CMS, right? So, and that's what you're talking about, isn't it? About content operations, that this sort of from idea to the finished product is managing that whole process in one place outside of email and Word. Correct.
So I love the word you use, the democratization of content, right? And I talk about it from ideation through to archive, because there's so much in between. And just having the pieces, and a lot of organizations that we work with, they actually have the pieces. They have the people, they have mostly the right technology. What they're missing are process. Over and over again, they're missing process. And even if they do have process, they don't have the three of those working in harmony together, right? So it's about creating those as cogs and wheels that connect with each other, that run the content like a conveyor belt out of the organization and into the audience's point of view, right? Because that's ultimately what you're trying to do.
Right. And do you think this is more of a problem for, I probably know the answer to this question from my own experience, but do you think this is a problem more for larger organizations, or do you think everybody could benefit from this?
I think everybody could benefit from it. I mean, and I say that recognizing that I'm biased and a PMP, so I have my project management certification and hug those books daily because that's the way I roll. But I think having structure, and we look at it as sometimes people say, oh, content ops, it's too limiting, right? So it's going to mean that I can't do this and I can't do that. And what it does actually is it puts structure around the content process, enabling the day-to-day stuff to be done more efficiently, more effectively, and better. But it also then actually opens up room for marketers and content creators and designers to do more innovative stuff, because the stuff that they're doing day in, day out becomes very rote, right? Habitualized. So it doesn't take as much effort. You're relying and leveraging the capabilities of the technology to do what it can do and what it's meant to do. which frees up time for that creative, open, parts of the job that often aren't getting tended to. And, that's not to say that you're going to schedule 100% of your time and follow process and it's all going to fit into this nice box. We look at it as 70, 30, 80, 20 optimally, where 70 to 80% of a content operation is predictable. So you have a content calendar that tells you what's coming up, the pieces that are being generated, what the tone, the voice, all of that is defined. But then you're leaving room, that 20 to 30%, for when, the CEO comes and says she needs a presentation for tomorrow, right? You're not going to say no. You're going to have
that never happens. What are you talking about?
Right? And right in time communication. So think about, like Oreo's infamous dunk in the dark. They were able to respond to that because they had room. They had a process that enabled to be in time, in real time, interaction with its audiences. And you can't not have that. And that's where companies are failing now, is they don't have time to do that. We worked with a company. It took them 2.5 weeks to approve a tweet. Why are you bothering? What's the point? It's done, right? Like, no.
Yeah. I'm nearly choking. That was so funny. And I've seen those kinds of instances myself as well. And I've lost my point. So, but one of the things I think as well from what I've seen from this is because we're sort of on this production hamster wheel that we never sort of look back either, and we don't think about what we're going to do. We don't think about what we have done. We're just working for the day. And also I was thinking about where you were saying there about having that headspace to be reactive. But because the majority of the time people are spending their time not even thinking strategically about their plans or what's on their content calendar, but what is it they've got to do today on that hamster wheel? Is that what you see as the primary challenge that people need to overcome?
Yeah, and I hear you using hamster wheel as a negative thing, and like I said, I think content ops should be a hamster wheel, a well-oiled, smooth wheel with a governor in place to make sure that things aren't moving too fast or too slow, right? Because that's what happens is people get ahead of themselves trying, they're already thinking about the final answer without thinking about the pieces that go into the answer. And again, that's what content operations, a good content operations practice will enable is to step back and not think about, I need a white paper, I need a webinar, I need a I need a microsite. It's okay. Who are our audiences? What do they want or need from us? And what's the best way to deliver that? Okay. Now that you know that, okay, what's our theme? What's our voice? How does this tie in? And one of the pieces too is companies very rarely tie back their content strategy to their overall corporate organizational goals and objectives. And if you miss that, you're throwing stuff into the wind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two parts to that, isn't there? One of them is you're not going to deliver authentic content anyway if you're swimming against the tide of who your organization really are. And the second thing is you're not going to get your next content project approved because you're not aligned with the revenue goals or the the C-suite goals that they have, and therefore you've created a white elephant as far as they're concerned of content, right? That is of no value to it. It might be shiny and lovely, and you may be very proud of it, but if it hasn't actually delivered against any business objectives, then I'm sorry, but you're going to be fired, right?
Oh, 100%. Well, it's not harsh, but the thing is, one of the caveats I'd put around that is it doesn't need to be successful as long as it's planned with purpose. And aligned with the forethought of, okay, this is how it's going to or potentially support the company goal of XYZ. It's okay that it doesn't work. Now you know it doesn't work. And knowing that is as important of knowing as what does work, right? There's always lessons to be learned. Sure. So, try. I'm a big fan of agile, moving quickly, not so quickly you're tripping over your shoes, but and learning from each step. But that's the other thing that a lot of orgs don't have baked into the content ops process is analytics and BI stuff happens outside of the content team. So, there's somebody, think about, some person in a closet with big, thick glasses, pulling together reports. for me, okay, great. You want to keep the CMS under lock and key, fine. You want to put all kinds of like rules and stuff about accessing the dam, great. You know what? Open up the analytics tool. Have some predefined reports, have dashboards, but let people go in and play around with the data, because everybody's going to look at it a little bit differently. And the nuggets that you're going to get from those different perspectives will absolutely propel companies forward.
We're on a great topic there. I mean, we could just do 20 minutes just on measurement, because I think for content teams, measurement is a tricky one, isn't it? Because often they're measured on how many things they produce. And that gets back to my version of the hamster wheel of people just running for no purpose apart from to do stuff, execution marketing. But I got the sense there that your hamster wheel is actually connected to some kind of dynamo or something. You're generating electricity with your hamster wheel. Whereas mine's just disconnected in a cave somewhere and we're just running. Whereas I think yours is creating some value to the business, right? I think that might be the difference between the two.
I think you're right. I like I said, it's a hamster wheel that has a governor that's connected to a conveyor belt. So each of the hamster wheels are moving things forward and not moving out of sync with each other, right? So in order for it to be I guess it's more the cogs in the wheel, but thinking about hamsters running those cogs. It's propelling them forward at a manageable cadence.
Yes.
So that there's no part of that conveyor belt, the process from ideation through to archive, that is being piled up or stalled because of the wheel before or after them.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think we've got the topic for our live show over drinks was discussing hamster wheels.
Hamster wheels.
But on the measurement point as well, what do you recommend that content operations teams are actually measured against? Are they measured measured by production, or are they measured by the final engagement, or how do you track that all the way through?
So definitely not number of pieces. That we have to stop the crazy. Robert and I, in one of our workshops, have a whole bit on Bob the marketer and how he has this master plan, and so he's following along the plan, and then sales asks for this, and somebody else asks for that, and here goes Bob's plan, right? Because it's all about the pieces. So engagement, 100%. And understanding, where audiences are, what they like, what resonates, all of those kind of things. It's about internal measurement as well, which a lot of organizations don't do, is where is that content being used? Who's picking it up? How is it being merchandised? That's massive. There are components we've seen within organizations and pointed out to them that, hey, did you realize that this graphic or image or video, whatever, has been used across like 5 of your channels? It's being used in sales presentations. It's, it was part of the AGM. Like, that is a killer piece of content. And they're not looking at that. They're strictly looking at things like likes and retweets and things like that. And you can't do that. It's got to be a combination of measurement.
Yeah, and I really like that idea that the piece of content is just an image, for example, that is reused in other things. I think that, anyway, we're coming up to time. I could dive into any of this stuff probably for the rest of my afternoon, the rest of your morning. But finally, I'm going to ask you the last question, which I didn't do last time for some reason when I re-listened back to our interview. I'd like a nomination for our Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, our portal to marketing hell for overhyped trends, BS, and snake oil from this marketing industry we love. What would you see chucked into our pool?
Oh, geez, I missed that question when you told me you were going to ask me that.
Now, you can't admit that you weren't prepared, Cathy. I mean,
I just
you of all people.
I totally just did. What would I check in? I think what I would love to see is people stop just what we were talking about. I'm gonna dovetail on what we were talking about. Stop measuring success by the number of pieces created. So it is not about volume. I take issue with, there's one vendor in particular who talks about content velocity, and they've qualified it over the years, but initially it was all about getting stuff out, right? And it's not about that. You could have companies we've seen, you could do 20% of what they're churning out today, but if it was purposeful and started with the audience at the very first step, that's the why and the raison d'etre for creating that content, they would be far well and ahead of where they are today. So stop measuring by pieces and start looking at impact.
I agree. Does this thing need to be a weekly blog post? I completely agree. That's the hamster wheel. I think we're both agreed on that. And you can trust a Canadian to pronounce raison d'etre properly. So I like that too. All right, Cathy, when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
I'm everywhere. LinkedIn, Twitter, and I'm going to tease it up now. There's a new outlet coming soon in the next month or so.
Oh, is that a you and Robert thing?
That's a me thing. So
you thing? Oh, how exciting!
So
I think it's about time you wrote a book, to be honest, Cathy. So
you know what? Everybody keeps asking me to do that. So it would have been the time to do that. I'm a little late on the uptick, but
no, I think my experience is everybody wrote a book during COVID, so you could be the first. There's probably going to be a desert of marketing books over the next year as we get out of COVID. So now would be the time to strike.
You're right. You know what? So maybe I'll have two things, but I have one thing coming in the next month or so we can maybe talk about that on our live cast.
Well, and also this time maybe I'll keep my promise and have you back a bit sooner than a whole year. All right, Cathy. Well, I look forward to seeing you in person, Cathy. It's a shame for the rest of the listeners; they won't all be there. And I'll have you back on the show. Thanks very much, Cathy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Nice seeing you.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Thank you, Cathy. Always fun to geek out on content, and I will definitely not leave it as long next time to have her back on the show. I'll include all her links in the show notes, and listeners, please say hello if you enjoyed our chat. If you're a regular listener, firstly, thank you, but you'll be familiar with the content advisory through her colleague, my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, their chief troublemaker. Speaking of which, it's that time. Robert is waiting in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Let's see where we are going to be transported to with a cocktail and a marketing thought this week. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend. Here we are in the bar, and it is a noisy Friday night here in the bar. I guess a couple of weeks ago it was the Finnish goth metal band that we had.
It was. And I found one.
I know you did. And this, have you gone country western all of a sudden? Because it's some classic steel guitar and some twangy tunes.
It's quite the hoedown in here, isn't it?
It's quite the hoedown in here this week. I am just so surprised. This is not something you usually see in the CMO Rockstar Bar. Yeah,
it is not. But it's again, I think there was a mistake on the booking. Normally we have a mariachi band for you, but this week they turned up and here they are. So
yeah,
I'll just wait for them to pipe down for a moment and for some of the line dancing to cease.
There we go.
That's better. Okay. And so, should we order some drinks? Or
we should. I do have a lovely cocktail, and one that actually this week, I believe you're going to be able to construct.
Good Lord.
Because we're calling it the Muddy Martini. Yes, and you've heard of the Dirty Martini, of course.
I have.
But we're calling the Muddy Martini because it's really dirty. And of course, it all starts with your favorite gin. I'm assuming that will be Hendrick's, but we will see what you have there in the bar. But your favorite gin for a martini. Now, here's the thing: you then start to add in things, right? Of course, you're going to shake this, right? So you've got your crushed ice to shake it in, and all of that into your shaker. But into this mix will go. I like to put in 2 tablespoons of green olive juice, right? So just, taking some olive juice from the olives that you have in your refrigerator. A little bit, of course, dry vermouth, to add in, whether you like to just wave the bottle or actually pour some into it. That's up to you. And then actually, and this is something that you should actually have as an Englishman. Do you have capers in your refrigerator?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Because if you can take a little bit of the caper brine, and this is where it gets its name, put that in there. 1 tablespoon will do fine. And then, of course, and I like to get the prepackaged Cerignola olives because they're big, and I love an olive in a martini. And so a couple of the big Cerignola olives, and especially if they have like some spices to them or have been had spiced a little bit, put that into the ultimate cocktail there. And it's a muddy mess when you pour it into a glass. Don't be concerned about the color. It will not be clear when you pour this in. But it's a lovely tasting, very spicy, and wonderful martini.
Nice. I am tempted to dash around the house and fetch those ingredients because I did go for a little phase of having a martini on a Friday night with you, but I felt that the listener experience was probably a bit off because it took me a quarter of an hour to make it and clanking and clanging. So let's see what I do have on my desktop bar. Well, I have some gin. So finally, we have some agreement on that. This will be Hendrick's gin, as you rightly predicted. Pour some of that. Oh, there's ice in yours, but you kind of stir it cold, don't you?
Well, I put it all into a shaker and shake it all up.
Yeah. I did that for a while, as you know, and
yes,
I think I've broken people's eardrums on this show by trying to do that. So I've poured a bit of that in there, and I honestly do in my fridge, which is on my way back into the house from my home office. I have both a jar of capers I can see in my mind's eye and the olives. And so I'm totally going to make this after the show. But for now, I have to put up with, reluctantly, obviously, with whatever those fine folks at Fever Tree decide to put into a drink. And they have decided that rather than capers and olives, I should just go for cucumber. So I'm going for cucumber tonic, the most English kind of olives.
Absolutely fantastic.
Is the cucumber. In fact, the cucumber is probably related to, it's related to pickles, isn't it? Which is nothing like it. All right, I'm going to give this a try. Oh, that's delicious. I can taste the gin in that. That's very nice.
Yes, there you go.
And what are we calling this?
We're calling this the Muddy Martini.
Muddy Martini. I love it. And where would one go and drink a Muddy Martini?
Well, there is a place that I have discovered and that I'm actually going to go to, and it's just looks lovely. So there is a place north of San Francisco. It's about 3 hours north of San Francisco by driving, which I know always surprises those in Europe so much because it's like, things are really far away in the U.S. Because you're like, 3 hours north of London. Well, that's Scotland. So,
mate, in our traffic, that's just about the outskirts of London.
That's true as well. Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah, 3 hours north of London, and traffic is still London. That's a good point. Anyway, it's 3 hours north of San Francisco, and it's a place. There isn't really even a town. It is just a resort. It's called the Harbor House Inn, and if you Google it, you'll see it's just absolutely spectacularly beautiful. It's right on the coast. Yeah. It's not, for your beach loving going. It is, big, wonderful redwood trees and, high cliffs and, very Wuthering Heights types of rocks and beaches and those kinds of things. Yeah. So, but it is absolutely spectacular from a sitting around and meditating and talking and chatting and having a muddy martini and just enjoying yourself.
Nice. And it's in your part of the world, but like you say, there's so much, isn't there? Just on that west coast, you can go from where you are in the sunshine through all these different places, can't you? All the way up to the north to Seattle and Portland, can't you? It's all different.
Yeah, it's absolutely different. Yeah, it can be very, very different from there's a famous saying here in Southern California that says you can have breakfast at the beach, lunch in the ski chalet, and dinner in the desert. And so it's
amazing.
It is I've done it. I've absolutely done it. It's it's kind of a harried day, but you can actually technically do it.
Well, I think that it isn't that a rite of passage if you're a Californian, that you must do that once in your life. Just
That's
to prove
right.
The saying is true.
You definitely must do it once in your life, for sure.
Well, that sounds delightful. And so we're in this lovely lodge, by the sounds of things, in the more temperate climate, I guess, that far north San Francisco from you. So, but I imagine the weather is still absolutely gorgeous, and we're drinking these wonderful gin drinks. These wonderful, dirty martinis. What are we going to be talking about, mate?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about content strategy and actually doing it, which is an interesting way to phrase it, I know, because inevitably one of the things that I find is so fascinating about implementing, there's it's the classic sort of there's doing the strategy, and then there's actually implementing the strategy, which
this sounds like an episode of Seinfeld.
It's the most difficult thing, right? It is not uncommon for me to be working with a client or hear this at a workshop or something where you've built the business case, you've gotten the permission, you've laid out the roadmap, you've got the initiatives that you need to take under wing, ready to roll. And then you go, congratulations, you're ready to begin. And the client says, there's a heavy sigh, and they say, yeah, but now we actually have to do it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, to me, is there's a wonderful metaphor that works with, which comes from the world of tightrope walking. It's in a book, and the book is a collection of short stories, and it's called The Vigilantes of Love. It's not a terribly good book, just to be honest, but there's one short story in there that is narrated by a tightrope walker, and the tightrope walker says it's the second step. Everybody thinks it's the first step that's hard. It's actually the second step that's the hardest. And when asked why, the tightrope walker says, well, because the hardest step is that second step, because that's when, once you step out on the tightrope and then you take that second step, that's where you gain or lose your balance. That's where it either is going to be a walk or a fall. Yeah. There's no going back after the second step.
Yeah, you're committed.
You're committed is exactly right. And I thought that was a really interesting metaphor for this, because it is that second step. It's the actual starting that can do it. Because one of the things that comes up often when we think about content strategy implementation is this idea of, can we do it? Right? We question ourselves and we say, can we do it? And there are usually three responses when we say, can we do this? Right? There's the dismissive sort of, well, they did it, so we can certainly, if they did it, we can do it, right? Yeah. Which is, very dismissive, weirdly dismissive of the person, but not dismissive of the actual plan. A great example of that is the latest NFT thing, right? Where Beeple sells a stupid JPEG for $69 million, and we all go, well, we could totally do that. Yeah, you didn't. You didn't do that. You know, he did, and he got paid for it. That's the lesson, the boldness there of actually doing the thing. But then there's also the template response, right? Where we go, oh, I just need a template. Just give me a checkbox, and we can totally do it. It's like, no, it never works out that way, right? I mean, when was it ever that you downloaded a case study and went, oh, yeah, this is going to go exactly the way their case study went? It never goes that way. It never goes that smoothly. And then there's the looking outside. This is my favorite, which is looking outside of your industry or your business or even the project itself, and just looking for some sort of spark of innovation, because that's what you can look to take that second step, because you can start to use that as a North Star. So in this particular case, I was working with this client who was like, oh, now we have to go do it. And it's like, right, we'll go get inspired by something completely different, a business that put in a big enterprise content management system, or they, otherwise executed some big change. what did they do? Like not how did they do it, but what did they do that really made them successful and made that big change in the implementation part successful? And it's really around finding that plan that brings you to it. In other words, not looking for a template, not looking for something that you can go, oh, that's the easy way, that's the checklist way, but rather finding this inspiration that forces you to actually bring your innovation, your creativity, your knowledge to the table. Because when you've put your foot out on that tightrope and then you're going to take that second step, it is all you. And when it's all you, that's when it becomes a walk and not sort of something where you can, you have to improvise to not fall. So it's just I just think it's a different approach, and it's one that I found that's really interesting in making that commitment.
I love that analogy, and you see that in all sorts of marketing disciplines, don't you? Especially like working with somebody like yourself or with a design agency or somebody like that who helps you maybe define your story or define your brand or whatever it is. That bit is, I mean, it's not easy by any extent, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. But the implementation, that first step on is, and the hard miles that you're going to need to do for the next, 6, 12, 18 months is the tough bit, isn't it? That you need to continually be motivated to move forward with this initiative. Otherwise, it's ultimately going to fail. It's
a great point. I mean, it really is a great point. And in fact, it's funny enough because the book itself, the short story, what the narrator does toward the end is say, he spends a lot of time talking about that second step. The commitment, basically your commitment. But then what he says is he says the third step is actually the beginning, right? The third step is when you complete that first big project or that first big part of the initiative or that first big task that you have to do. That's the third step. And then, because it becomes one complete motion of of your new idea, right? It becomes one complete. That third step is the first time that you actually take a step out on the full step on the tightrope, right?
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. And then he says the fourth step is actually an affirmation that your third step was right. And he says by the fifth step, it's just walking. Right.
By that point, you're not. I mean, I guess the third step, you're a tightrope walker, and I guess the fourth step, you're just a walker.
That's right.
I was trying to form in my head.
Right? I love that metaphor so much because it's like, right, it's not until you get to the fifth step that you're actually doing the thing. And because that first step is just literally coming up, taking the courage to say, am I going to do this? Yes, I'm going to do this. The second step is you actually committing to do it. The third step is actually the first step in doing the thing. And then the fourth and fifth step become sort of the affirmations that you're actually on a right path.
Yeah. And that initial, I mean, we see that, don't we? Like I said, in so many marketing initiatives, that initial friction, that initial point at the beginning about getting something going. And then I guess what we're saying there in the fourth and fifth steps, it becomes the thing you do, right? It's like any habit, isn't it? It becomes a habit within the business. Oh, we are going to do content marketing. Therefore, we are going to do these processes, and this is what we're going to do.
Well, that's a great point too. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, which is it becomes a pattern, right?
Yeah. And you've proven it, or proven it, speaking American, in the fourth step, right? You've done an iteration.
Yes.
Because I didn't think you'd understand me otherwise. So
yes, right. Yes.
You've done an iteration, and therefore the fifth, sixth, seventh is going to be, like you say, it's just walking at that point. That's a great story. I love that. Yes, and I shall totally. I need to start writing a lot more of these down and stealing them more. But yes, I love that. I love that analogy of being a tightrope walker. Thank you very much, Robert. And where might people find other analogies such as this associated with our everyday lives?
Oh, we're filled with analogies at contentadvisory.net. In fact, the whole website is one giant analogy, really, if you really look at it that way. So contentadvisory.net is our little hobble on the net.
Lovely. Yes. And I had your colleague, Cathy McKnight, on the show this week. I know that I recorded these separately between the two of you. So, so we've got a nice content strategy thing, and we're definitely sending people to contentadvisory.net.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, TCA.
Yes.
Yeah, TCA in
the house. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where they're going to find you yourself, sir?
They'll find me primarily on LinkedIn and Twitter to connect on social media. And then, of course, I've got our own little podcast as well. It's called This Old Marketing, and would love to connect with everybody there too.
Yes, I enjoy it. That's my Friday lunchtime walk. I love the This Old Marketing, and I shall include a link, as I do every week actually, in the show notes of This Old Marketing. Thank you very much, Robert. And the most important question, will you be in the bar next week?
I believe so, and we'll hope it's a little quieter than this country band that seems to. Yeah.
I look forward to it. Thanks, mate. I'll see you then.
Cheers.
So that's a wrap on episode 106 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Cathy and Robert for sharing their insight. Please say hello, follow their work, and check out all their links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.fm, where you can also find all our previous episodes. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Please let us know and help other people find us by dropping a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff and I will continue with the final part of the 5 effing marketing fundamentals. I'm looking forward to chatting with President and CEO at Avocet Communications, Laurie Jones, and Robert will be back in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.